It's lovely to be here. Just a quick introduction on the company. We are a spin-off of Cambridge University, and we originally were making digital twins, gamified digital twins to teach strategy and entrepreneurship to students of a variety of sort of skill levels. And another part of the business is the scientific side, in which we work with CHERI, and that is the side that we'll be talking about today. So we got funding by DSDB or Describe to build a digital twin, a course-grained digital twin that helps companies in a variety of sectors to have a fairly good estimate as to what the exposure size is of their current cybersecurity levels, and as well as what would happen if they were using CHERI at both a product level as well as an organizational level. So the results that we'll be sharing would be a combination of both. So we're talking about sort of a 100% adoption of all critical systems onto CHERI. So I think, as with all sort of decent products out there, we do have to figure out what were we building this for. So this is based on Siraj's research that he did with a few other professors from a few other universities, where they were trying to figure out as to why CHERI, with all of its wonderful benefits, was not really getting adopted the way it should. And the big learning that came out of it was that boards and CFOs were just simply struggling to understand the value of putting in another chip design. But it also highlighted an overall problem with the cybersecurity sector, that quite a few people literally do not know where the money will come back from, right? And the CTOs, the chief information security officers, they either did not have the skills within their team to do those sort of computations and come back with a business case, or they simply did not know the language on which this was happening. So there was a lot of failure happening at the board level. So we had to find a way in which we could solve that problem. But as you guys know, it's not an easy problem to solve. So I'll spend the next few sort of slides talking about how we solved it, and I'll share some results. So the industry has basically struggled with this because of 4 reasons. The first one is companies actually do differ, even in the same sector. No companies are made in the same size or shape, even though you might consider them to be competitors. So that nuance usually goes missing with standardized tools. The second one is that data tends to be really, really difficult to get for cybersecurity scenarios. You get a bunch of inputs, but from all over the world, so there is uncertainty. The third one is what I already spoke about. A lot of CTOs do not have deep financial modeling expertise within their teams. It's not really needed for the function. But last but not the least, there's no clear assessment standard as to how do you define risk, right? And if you were to give it a dollar value, what does the dollar value mean? So there were a bunch of things that just has presented difficulty for the sector in general to figure out the dollar return of investment in CHERI. So we are solving these challenges by doing it in 2 ways. The first one is that we do what is the equivalent of a coarse-grained digital twin. So a fine-grained digital twin, the ones who look after simulations here, would know are extremely precise, but deeply wound around a certain organization or a certain use case. It is difficult to optimize it at scale for each kind of organization or each kind of use case. So what we did was we chose to go with a coarse-grained methodology. So what we do is we take a few inputs from the user, and we spin up a virtual company through its profit and loss sheet. And from those profit and loss sheets, we attach drivers of certain value, certain exposure, and then we forecast it at a coarse-grained level. So it means that if we were to sit down and work with specifically, I'm going to use the example of JLR because I feel there are a lot of people from there here. But if we were to sit down with JLR, that it would be a a fine-grained model that we would then produce on top of a coarse-grained one. But because this is available for everyone, we have to stick to a coarse-grained one. And then we do something known as chaotic math, in which we shake up data points in a certain distribution, statistical distribution type. And what it does is that the interactions of those temporal shakes show results which are of the highest probability. So we look at, say, 20,000 possibilities, mathematically speaking, but the ones which are the most probable are the ones which show up on top. And it is the interaction between them that produces a forecast, not the, they're not rigid formulas, let's put it this way. So there is stability, and then there's instability, and in between that lies our digital twin. So as I shared with you, the stable sides are, we will take your basic firm KPIs, revenues, number of customers, units sold, historical cybersecurity impacts. We now have tens of thousands of those data points that we have put those in. We have a very flexible financial model, so it covers for a lot of different industry types, including automotive. And then we do standardized output. So net present value is a language that CFOs get really well. It's when you discount future cash flows and bring them into the present. That is how you calculate the value of a company as well. But then we introduce instability to the process. We use different distribution types. We don't use just one data point. We use hundreds and thousands of them, so we cover a lot of ranges. We also, our financial model allows for multiple realities, so it can run multiple times over. And we do produce standardized outputs, but we also tell you what are the chances of that output from happening, right? So you could always come up with, for example, £1 billion exposure, but if for the probability of 1%, it's probably not worth fretting over, right? So we have to tell you what we think are the chances. So this approach is very similar to how graphic processing units upscale low-quality graphics to high-quality graphics. So they use, it's known as temporal anti-aliasing. And it produces a jitter, which is what we do as well, but we do it with data points and not with pixels. But it's the same logic, right? And what it ends up doing by introducing that chaos, it actually produces a sharper picture. If you were too disciplined and did not have any chaos in the digital twin, then it won't be as crisp. The output won't be as crisp, which is roughly what graphic cards also do. And yeah, so we basically have 2500 plus variables. We run basically 4 digital twins in parallel when we are doing a compute. You should be able to see that on the Describe website in the next couple of weeks, and you can use it for free, have a go at it. But we do around 20,000 temporal loops. We're doing a lot of jittering, and which comes out to be around 50 million compute that we cover in 3.5 minutes. So it's fairly fast. It does not use the cloud. It is all local compute, so we've found ways of bringing it to the point that somebody on a regular desktop can use it. And this is per company. Obviously, we can extrapolate it entire sectors, and if needed, the entire of the UK, if we wanted to. Obviously, it's a lot of work, and we are only paid to do it on a per company basis. So just to give you an example, so I've just taken a generic automotive maker. This is a picture made by Midjourney. When I entered the prompt that give me a generic car, it gave me this. So I'm assuming the 20 billion pounds of revenue, £500 million of free cash flow, 20,000 employees, sales footprint is global. Number of cars sold, I've assumed it to be 300,000, and cybersecurity maturity to be on average across the board. Now, in the actual digital twin, you will be asked a lot of questions as part of the process. It's very gamified, very straightforward to answer. It's not something that you need a rocket scientist for. But I've really simplified it here. You can make a lot of tweaks when you actually work with the product. And so we've run the simulation. It comes back with answers in the next 4 or 5 minutes odd. So we look at 2 different scenarios. One is a device hijack, sort of what Shah spoke about, your car getting taken over, or your car getting stolen, or your car being held for ransom. So we've looked at that. And so for with and without CHERI, there are substantial savings. If it was done correctly, if it is done end-to-end on an end-to-end basis. The bigger exposure, usually with a lot of cars, smart cars being in the wild, is actually from data leakage. So data leakage is driven by the number of endpoints you have in a company. Usually 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it used to be number of employees and number of computers and servers. But now with smart cars, for example, for automotive, your data leakage exposure footprint has increased geometrically. So with every time, for example, this car manufacturer is selling 300,000 cars a year, let's assume it's not growing. You look at it on a 15 or a 5-year basis, you're looking at a very, very large number of cars out there. So the endpoints, for example, would have increased from just 20,000 employees and their computers to over 2 million. So the data leakage exposure is huge. These are walking sort of time bombs in a way. So you have to really make sure that it works, and that's why the exposure size is much bigger on the data leakage front. So these are some numbers that are there. In the actual product, you will get each of the components of this impact, things like cost of recall, PR cost, any penalties you give for certain scenarios to happen. And it produces a very nice report for you, along with your assumptions that you can then share it with your CFO and hopefully find some sort of a language in which you could speak about the opportunities that CHERI protection provides. So with that, we are done. So yeah, so thank you so much. Siraj.